The Brazilian national team enters the 2026 World Cup in a remarkably unusual and paradoxical position. On the global stage, they remain the eternal symbol of attacking football, still possessing stars with an artistic flair in their blood who make every opponent wary. However, the dazzling glory of the past is gradually being overshadowed by the cracks of the present. Head coach Carlo Ancelotti is facing a campaign that is far from smooth on North American soil. The desire to reclaim the Golden Trophy after more than 2 decades of waiting since 2002 is stronger than ever. But to achieve that goal, the Samba dancers must confront a harsh reality. They are no longer the undisputed number 1 favorites. This skepticism is not without reason, as the modern football landscape has witnessed the powerful rise of pragmatic tactical systems from Europe, where discipline and the ability to suffocate space have been elevated into an art form. Through the lens of tactical analysis and harsh real-world statistics, the team in yellow and blue is showing several critical weaknesses. If they cannot quickly find solutions to these problems, the dream of a 6th world title will remain a distant illusion. Looking back at the South American qualifying campaign, the statistics exposed an alarming and highly unstable side of the Brazilian national team. Brazilian football history had never witnessed a qualifying campaign in which the Selecao struggled so much. Appearing exhausted, ineffective, and lacking vitality, after 18 difficult matches, they suffered 6 defeats, drew 4 games, and managed only 8 victories, ultimately finishing 5th in the regional standings. This was the lowest position in their history in a World Cup qualifying campaign. Marking a disappointing milestone, they also conceded 19 goals, a highly alarming defensive record for a football powerhouse. What is even more concerning is that, despite proudly boasting a tradition of vibrant attacking football and a squad filled with expensive stars competing across Europe, the team scored only 24 goals throughout the entire campaign. To fully understand the extent of this weakness, it is important to note that their top scorer throughout that grueling campaign was Raphinha, with just 5 goals to his name. This is an extremely modest figure and one that is completely inconsistent with the stature of a team that enters every tournament with the ambition of becoming champions. This lack of cohesion is not merely a problem of an attack lacking sharpness. It also stems from a defensive system that appears patchwork and severely lacking in synchronization. In their glorious past, Brazilian football proudly introduced the world to legendary full-backs, endless engines capable of seamlessly contributing both in attack and defense without ever seeming to tire. However, at this World Cup, the 2 flanks appear to be the team's greatest weakness and most vulnerable areas. The unfortunate absence of the rock-solid center-back Éder Militão due to injury has dealt a significant blow to the team's ambitions, leaving the defensive wall in front of goal more fragile than ever before. When head coach Carlo Ancelotti chooses to deploy an attack-oriented tactical system, often maintaining 4 attacking players up front, the burden of ball-winning and defensive coverage placed on the 2 central midfielders, Casemiro and Bruno Guimarães, becomes overwhelming. This imbalance frequently causes Brazil's shape to stretch during transitional phases, creating vast spaces in the half spaces and central channels for opponents to exploit freely. The current team resembles a giant machine equipped with tremendous firepower, yet it exposes far too many fatal weaknesses in defensive protection, making them a prime target for pragmatic and well-organized opponents. Throughout the past several decades, even when the defense occasionally struggled or made costly mistakes, the Brazilian national team could always find complete reassurance in its goalkeeper. Yet, ironically, on the eve of this year's biggest football tournament on the planet, the goalkeeping position has become a source of considerable concern and uncertainty for both the coaching staff and the fans. In theory, the first-choice goalkeeper remains Alisson Becker, who stands above the rest in terms of quality, experience, and composure on the biggest stages. However, he has recently recovered from a thigh injury that kept him sidelined for nearly 2 months, and he is now racing against time to regain his best form. For a goalkeeper competing at the highest level of world football, a lack of consistent match time can significantly erode spatial awareness, decision-making, and overall sharpness, making individual mistakes far more likely to occur. Meanwhile, the backup option, Ederson, brings an entirely different concern centered around his mental state and emotional stability on the pitch. After a turbulent season with Fenerbahce in Turkey, Ederson has repeatedly seemed to lose his composure. He became involved in heated confrontations with fans, was suspended following an intense reaction during a tense match against Galatasaray, and even reportedly punched part of the technical area. Such displays of aggression and loss of control stand in stark contrast to the calmness and composure that once defined him. In a short tournament like the World Cup, Carlo Ancelotti understands all too well that a single moment of lost concentration or emotional instability can be enough to end a team's hopes of progressing further. Previous alternative options such as Bento have also struggled, repeatedly making mistakes at club level, while his performances for Al Nassr have highlighted a lack of consistency when dealing with aerial situations. Ultimately, the team may have to rely on Weverton, a goalkeeper who has already passed the peak of his career. The lack of a last line of defense that is in ideal condition, both in terms of form and mentality, represents a ticking time bomb within the team's tactical setup. Alongside the extreme uncertainty in goal, the ability to control the tempo of matches has also become a critical issue. The current Brazilian national team possesses tremendous speed in transition, but it lacks the intelligence and composure needed to slow the game down and dictate the rhythm when circumstances require it. Forward Raphinha candidly shared a remarkably insightful perspective. We still lack a better understanding of the game, knowing when to control the match and when to attack. That is extremely important if we want to enter the tournament as a more mature team. This impatience and tendency to commit too heavily to attacking play can sometimes turn Brazil into victims of ruthless counterattacks from more experienced opponents, lacking the composure needed to slow the game down and lull their rivals into mistakes. The South American side can easily become trapped in a relentless high-tempo contest, ultimately draining its own physical resources in the process. The final weakness, and perhaps the greatest psychological barrier that Brazilian football must courageously confront and overcome, is the heavy dependence on Neymar's magical talents. A reliance that has persisted for more than a decade. At 34 years old, with a body that has been relentlessly worn down by a long series of injuries, Neymar can no longer serve as the team's unquestioned cornerstone. His inclusion in the squad for this tournament appears to carry more symbolic and emotional significance than genuine sporting value. On a deeper level, it may also reflect the enormous pressure exerted by commercial sponsors on the Brazilian Football Confederation. Completely leaving out a living legend could trigger a fierce wave of controversy. But continuing to accommodate him also carries the risk of disrupting the team's structure. If not managed carefully, his presence could unintentionally limit the opportunities for the next generation of players, who need playing time and responsibility in order to emerge and establish themselves on the biggest stage. However, the arrival of the seasoned tactician Carlo Ancelotti on the sidelines may be the golden key to resolving this symbolic crisis. What has defined Ancelotti's greatness throughout his illustrious managerial career is not merely his tactical sophistication, but rather his exceptional ability to manage personalities and build cohesive teams. At AC Milan and Real Madrid, he successfully balanced and guided some of the greatest footballing personalities in history. His enduring philosophy has always been clear: never build an entire team around a single individual. Under Ancelotti's leadership, the Brazilian national team is entering a period of significant transition, one that seeks to move beyond dependence on any one star and establish a more balanced and collective identity. Young, energetic attacking talents who are entering the prime years of their careers, Vinícius Júnior, Raphinha, Gabriel Martinelli, Matheus Cunha, and the prodigy Endrick, are now being given the opportunity to determine the fate of matches for themselves. They possess a winning mentality and an immense desire to prove their worth on the biggest stage. The team's playing style is being reorganized with a greater emphasis on balance, showing a willingness to defend deeper when necessary and launch razor-sharp counterattacks based on pace rather than relying solely on individual flair and technical brilliance. The collective championship models demonstrated by Argentina in 2022 and Spain in 2010 serve as reflections of the path that the Selecao is now seeking to follow. The courage to abandon a mindset built around dependence on a single superstar represents a major step forward in the team's evolution and footballing philosophy. Although the road ahead will be filled with challenges and the current squad is not as glamorous as some of the legendary Brazilian teams of the past, the discipline, pragmatism, and unity that Carlo Ancelotti is tirelessly instilling may be the only true antidote to the team's shortcomings. Only by courageously confronting and thoroughly addressing these critical weaknesses can Brazil truly transform into an unpredictable winning machine, capable of writing a new chapter in its storied history. From an overall perspective, Brazil at the 2026 World Cup may not be the most glamorous or explosive team in the nation's history, but it could very well be the most realistic and pragmatic one. No longer carrying the burden of being labeled the undisputed favorite may actually serve as a hidden advantage, relieving much of the pressure and expectations placed upon the shoulders of its young players. The defensive vulnerabilities, the uncertainty in goal, and the challenge of controlling match tempo are all genuine weaknesses that have been clearly exposed. Yet these weaknesses also represent the ultimate test of the new era under Carlo Ancelotti. Through pragmatism, discipline, and an unwavering sense of unity, if Brazil can bravely confront and overcome its own limitations, the Samba dancers may well turn the dream of a sixth World Cup title into reality.